Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth and the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. The disappearance of Elizabeth Conway. Elizabeth Conway, reported missing on the 18th of November, 1986. 5'5", slender build, brown hair, and green eyes. Last seen leaving school premises on the 13th of November at roughly 1600, wearing her school uniform, white shirt, navy blazer, tie, and tights, a double-breasted brown overcoat with white buttons, and a black woolly hat. First missing persons report of the victim: no previous criminal record, no records of mental illnesses, no reports of family conflict, no records of conflict at school. So, no reason to run away, thought the inspector, as he meticulously read over her profile, line by line, taking a long drag of his cigarette in between. No suspects, no trails, and no trace of the missing girl. The only lead, a Nikon F3 SLR, with a large crack streaking across its lens. There was nothing special about the camera itself. In any ordinary case, one would suspect nothing of a broken camera under a shedding oak tree, hidden in a pile of leaves. They'd tut and shake their head at the thought of an inconsiderate litterer, leaving a trail of rubbish without a speck of care for the environment. Even to the inspector, it would be meaningless litter, except it was found near the route Elizabeth would take to get home from school. Through the entrance nearest to the duck pond, to feed them the crusts from her sandwiches she refused to eat. Past the fields of goal posts where the local Sunday league teams would train. Through the heavily wooded area where the owls and squirrels nested, before reaching the exit next that led to the local pub, where she would find her house on the end of the road. Yet even passing places that would often be swarming with people, witnesses, the girl seemed to have vanished without a trace. Perhaps it was his intuition and expertise that made him question the worth of the camera. Or perhaps it was his desperation to solve the case without a single suspect or lead that made him hold on to a false sense of hope. Whichever it was, he allowed himself the hint of a smile at the result of trusting his judgment, as he swept his eye across the photos that hung across the dark room. The photos of the girl who had disappeared without a trace. The constable stood in disbelief at the first lead in the impossible case. Had it not been for the countless nights of sleep he lost in desperate search of a clue. And now he held on to the clue in his hands as he would his own child. It was heavy. It came with a neck strap, noticeable if she had dropped it, clearly, it was discarded on purpose. What could the girl have seen that made her throw away such an exquisite bit of kit? He wondered. One by one, the two closely analyzed each scene from the roll of 400 films, searching for the pieces of the puzzle that was hidden within. Seems like we may have our first few suspects. The constable held the print under a blood crimson tint that dimmed across the dark room. He streaked his hands over the two girls, one who seemed tanned recently from the Mediterranean, with bright blonde hair, throwing a frisbee to the other with silky black hair, who seemed to fix a jealous gaze towards a boy that lay next to Elizabeth on a picnic blanket. Her had grazing his wavy brown hair. The photo had been taken in the same park Elizabeth passed through on the way to school. The inspector's hunch was correct. There had to be a clue within the photos, as few as there may have been on the roll. These three seemed to appear in a lot of these photos, especially this lad here. Suspects, maybe. The inspector spoke with a tone of sarcasm. Or perhaps, constable, a concept you may not be familiar with. They are her friends? The constable growled in disapproval, unable to reply with a witty comeback, as he continued to shake his head at the photos. I don't know, Inspector. There's just something quite off about these photos, as if something isn't right in these pictures. Though he rolled his eyes at the constable's intuition, or rather, his lack of, he could not help but agree as he continued to analyze the other photos. Some, like the one the inspector had pointed out, were of her in the park. The location they suspected of her last whereabouts. The photo at the end of the wash line caught his eye more than the others. The photo of the girl walking away into the wooded area. He could not explain the cold shiver that flooded his body. Perhaps it was the faded glow around her, casting an ominous shadow in the dark winter night. Perhaps it was the way she seemed to be descending into an abyss of darkness, never to be seen again. Some by the school, seemingly at the start of the day, judging by the children heading towards the building. Some by the front of her house, and a few in various random locations, such as cafes, restaurants, and cinemas. There seemed to be no pattern in the location, other than the fact Elizabeth didn't seem to travel very much, or very far, if these places she deemed worthy of photographing. Or perhaps, the inspector thought, there was a significance to these seemingly mundane locations. Either way, all these locations had previously been searched, revealing no trace of the girl. He noted the appearances of each new face he came across, analyzing body language between characters and secrets hidden behind each expression. He scanned each person in depth, as if he were questioning them in an interrogation. He knew, of course, that the basis of such assumptions would be no different to creating characters for a storybook. The balance of assumption and deduction was a fine line. Perhaps, he thought, there would be someone lurking within these photos, hidden away in the background. Someone with a vengeful eye, waiting to kidnap poor unsuspecting Elizabeth. But he dared not suggest it to the constable, at least not yet. To suspect such a thing would escalate the case to a criminal investigation. From his experience, escalating a missing persons case turned out to have severe consequences for the person who was eventually found, dead or alive. He was somewhat relieved to find no such person lurking in the background. He took a step back and sharply exhaled a cloud of smoke in relief. He tilted his head and gathered his remarks, taking another drag of his cigarette. So far, only two things seemed to correlate with the photos. One being nothing more than a hunch. He could not quite place it, but there was something familiar about many of the views in the photos. Holding a photo in one hand and taking a hit of his cigarette in another. What was this sense of familiarity he felt? It was as if he had stood exactly where the photographer had. "It's strange," mumbled the constable. "Look at it in a certain way, and you could follow the girl's daily routine. Leave home, go to school, walk home through the park, hang out with friends. Seems like she goes through life in a hurry, judging by the blurriness of them all." The inspector grinned at the constable's remark. The quality of photography that went into the pictures was quite rushed and poorly taken. Aside from Elizabeth, the others in the pictures seemed distorted or blurry. Either the girl's skills were in dire need of improvement, or she was too consumed by her own vanity to focus on anything else in the photos. Given that she was in every single photo, the latter was more likely. Except she didn't seem to face the camera in any of the shots. His eyes fixed once again on the girl on her own, walking into the wooded area. "Tell me something," said the inspector, circling his head across the room. "What kind of photos would you take on your camera?" The constable raised an eyebrow, puzzled by the inspector's attempt at small talk. "Nice scenery, friends, family, pets, events, perhaps any special occasions I'd like to remember precisely. So my question is, out of a roll of 400 photos, given the cost of rolls and prints these days, why only take photos of yourself? And why such blurry ones?" The hum of electricity flowed through the dark-room lights, as if the room, too, was anticipating the constable's answer. Could it be, he thought aloud, that the camera may not actually belong to Elizabeth? "I fear so, Constable. Now ask yourself this. The photos are blurry and poorly lit, possibly due to the zoom distorting the camera's focus, and due to the lack of flash used. So why are the photos so poorly captured? And why does everyone in the photos seem to be doing quite mundane activities? The colors in the constable's face had suddenly bled dry as he deciphered the inspector's epiphany. You mean to tell me you see it too now, don't you? The inspected continued, masking the sense of dread he refused to succumb to. It's not the people in the photos we're after, but the photographer himself. The inspector took the last drag of his cigarette, as if to signal the constable to brace himself for the impact of his next words. A stalker. He closely narrowed his gaze at the photo at the end of the wash line, memorizing each of the minute details. These are the photos taken by Elizabeth's stalker. It all adds up. They were taken from a distance, by someone who did not want to be noticed. Except... The inspector's voice came to a ghostly whisper. Except when he was. His eyes shifted focus away from the missing girl and onto her shadow, as a look of terror took place of the once coy smile. As if he were watching it unfold on a theater screen, he pictured the girl stopping dead in her tracks as the accidental camera flash illuminated the bushes around her, which were once enveloped by the winter darkness. He pictured the girl gingerly turning her head towards, praying it was only a trick of the light, staring wide-eyed in horror at the silhouette next to the tree. He pictured the man livid at his mistake as he tossed the camera, the evidence, as his expression changed to the smolder of a predator in the wild who had been spotted by his prey. As he pounced forward to begin the desperate chase, the inspector pictured the horror in the girl's face, living out the fear of every woman alone and vulnerable in the dark, fluidly sprinting away from the danger, lungs too strained to scream for help. He pictured the girl pounding her legs on the path, desperate to gain distance, only to be tackled down onto the damp, frosty grass. He pictured her writhing and clawing out to escape the clutches of her attacker, only to be dragged into the pitch-black abyss of the winter evening. The constable darted towards the door, coming to a sudden halt by the inspector's sharp grasp. "Let go!" he demanded. "This is out of your jurisdiction now. This is now an abduction case." But the inspector only strengthened his grip on the constable, refusing to release him. "Do you even know who you are looking for? We have no suspects and no other leads. If you sound the alarm now, we may never get the girl back. That stalker would know we were after him, and who knows what he'd do to the girl. The longer we wait, the more likely we are to lose the girl. It's already been almost a week. If we wait any longer, as you said, who knows what this guy could do? We'll find him. We're so close. It's all in there," the inspected exclaimed, pointing to the photos. "The clues are all in there. I just know it. Somewhere in this puzzle of photos is our suspect." The constable barged the inspector to release himself from his grip. He flicked the light switch on as he began to storm out the door. His hand slammed the handle of the door as he came to a sudden stop. He held his breath and paused. He looked back at the photos hanging from the wash line. Slowly, he approached the image of the school hanging in the middle of the room. The inspector curiously watched the constable, who had his eyes transfixed on the photo he held. One by one, the constable took the photos off the wash lines and began to arrange them in order. The inspector was all but helpless to wonder what was running through the constable's mind. But he dared not utter a word as the constable ordered the photos row by row. The constable's mind raced with thoughts, frantically searching for the thing that would connect the pieces to solve this mystery. Searching for a connection that may not even exist. But he had to try, his hands shuffling, sliding and shifting through the mounts and mounts of images. Finally, the constable took a few steps back at the puzzle he had solved, each photo laid in what appeared to be an order of brightness. They're taken through a specific route, he began. Take a look at the lighting, the shadows, and the location. The inspector, at a loss from his amazement, traced his eyes along the wash line. He watched the girl emerge from her house at first light, then wander into the school as more daylight emerged. He watched her have lunch with her friends by the cafe near the schools and walk home in the rapidly dimming light of the winter evening. It was all there in the lighting. Based on the path the photographer seems to have taken, I'd say the photos are taken in the same order as some sort of delivery route. The inspector could not help but crack a smile at the constable's genius breakthrough. It was all laid out perfectly. The route seemed to begin somewhere on Elizabeth's Road, where her house was, then to her school, taking other routes near the cafes and shopping center, finally ending at the park, where he'd presumably end his shift and watch the girl on her way home. The question is, who exactly would use a route like this? The inspector wondered. Solve the last piece of the puzzle, and we'll have our suspect. The milkman, perhaps? Unlikely, the constable answered. The milkman would be doing his route before anyone was up. A postman? Perhaps. But what would a postman be doing in a park? Surely someone would notice him hiding behind bushes and trees. An ice cream man could hide from his van. Never heard of anyone selling ice cream before school? Paperboy, again, what would he be doing in a park? The inspector dropped his head and clenched his fists in frustration. They were so close to finding their suspect. Both he and the inspector knew they had one chance at finding the suspect before the investigation became public, and before the abductor knew the police were after him. Before it would be too late for the girl. If it wasn't already, he lifted his arm to his mouth to take another drag of his cigarette. He growled in frustration as he realized He had already finished it. He needed another one, badly. He needed to focus. He reached into his coat pocket and balanced the nib between his lips. The sweet cherry scent of the Marlboro had immediately begun to work its magic, even before lighting it. He took his lighter from his back pocket, but stopped dead as the flints sparked. His gaze focused on the photos once again. He knew there was something familiar about the views in the photos. He had stood exactly where the photographer had been standing. He had stood in front of the laundrette that stood opposite the cafe, stood by the bus stop near the school, and stood by the same tree in the park, all while taking the last few drags of his cigarettas before throwing the butt into the bin. "It's the bin man," he exclaimed. "Drives around the houses and schools, then goes to the park to pick up the litter." "Of course," exclaimed the constable. "No one would suspect him hiding behind trees and bushes. Anyone would think he was only raking leaves or picking up litter. Anyone would think he was only doing his job." The inspector and constable nodded in unison. Both ran for their coats, darting out the door. They had their suspect, but there was no telling what he could have done to the girl. Both raced to the car and blared the siren, knowing it may have been too late to save the girl from the clutches of her stalker. Praying the worst had not yet succumbed to her. "It's murder, sir." A scream, the sharp clatter of a dropped tea service, the sound of soft sobs, a rush of footsteps up the stairs, the sight of a dead body, and then silence. "It's murder, sir," PC Connors spoke. DCI Whitcomb eyed the constable wearily, sighing inwardly. He was tired already, and they had just arrived at the scene of a particularly bloody crime. "For future reference, if we ever come across the body of an old lady sitting at her writing desk with a knife through her neck, let's take it as read that it's murder, Connors." DC Whitcomb sat in a chair and surveyed the room. "Where is WPC Sanders? I need her eyes up here." Whitcomb muttered the last sentence under his breath. He was a man who appreciated a woman on the police force, for she would often have a point of view that he would never see. She was certainly good at her job. She took excellent photographs, a new thing in police work. She also did a fine job with fingerprints, although Whitcomb had reservations about their usefulness. WPC Sanders struggled through the door, laden with equipment. No one offered to assist her. She had learned not to ask. With brisk movements, she set up the equipment and started taking photographs. Whitcomb didn't need to be there for this, but he stayed anyway. Connors stood by the door, shifting from foot to foot. DC. Whitcomb sighed again, this time audibly. "Connors, make yourself useful for once and gather the family downstairs, and make sure that blasted butler is there too." Whitcomb didn't like the fish-eyed butler at all. He looked suspicious. Why he looked suspicious was anyone's guess, but Whitcomb had taken an instant dislike to the man. Whitcomb poked around the old lady's room for a few minutes, taking mental notes and nodding his head a few times. Sanders carried on silently. She knew better than to interject her thoughts, but she also knew that she would be asked about her views on the case in due time. Satisfied, Whitcomb left the room, instructing Sanders to get a wriggle on, and then meet him downstairs. Whitcomb tested the hallways and the stairs on his way down. Solid, every square inch. Anyone could creep about up here and not be heard, he mused. The old lady had 2 sons and 1 daughter, all of whom lived with their now deceased mother in the mansion. The 3 progeny were all sitting, and they seemed nervous to Whitcomb. Naturally, he thought. One of them is a killer. I need to interview all of you separately. Once I have finished, I will send you back in here. There is to be no conversing between yourselves until I have finished. PC Connors will be here to make sure that you abide by my directive. I say! One of the men stood up, a small frown on his face, and a rather large whiskey in his hand. The law, Whitcomb said severely, requires this, sir. The man sat down and said nothing more, but his face showed his displeasure. The woman scoffed, either at her brother's reaction or the DCI's statements. One just couldn't be sure. DCI Whitcomb pointed at the man who had stood up, gesturing for him to approach with the crook of his forefinger. You first, sir. The questioning went along normal, well-worn lines. Whitcomb saw no need to alter what had always worked. You found out where everyone was during the crime, you looked for corroboration, and you noted any strange behavior. The stories were distressingly similar. Not to put too fine a point on it, the stories were exact. Everyone was downstairs, eating breakfast, when the maid discovered the body. No one had seen their mother since 10 o'clock the night before. All retired to bed at roughly the same time, a little after midnight. The butler and the head housekeeper, a married couple who had worked for the murdered woman for over 30 years, retired to their rooms a little before midnight. All the door and windows had been shut and locked. DCI Whitcomb leaned back and sighed. He had had to deal with 2 murders in his 30-year career before this one, and they had been straightforward. The guilty parties had been easily nabbed, the evidence had been plentiful, and the convictions had been a foregone conclusion. He thought of the men who had been hanged because of his efforts. He could still see them swinging slightly from their final earthly judgment at the end of a rope. With a slight shudder, he returned to his task. It's a nasty business, sir. PC Connors spoke up. Once again, he was standing in a doorway, shifting from foot to foot nervously. Whitcomb looked at him with some slight irritation. The man had a positive talent for stating the obvious. Why don't you go get yourself a cuppa? See if the staff have anything to say about it all. Take your time, Connors. Maybe have a biscuit or 2, Whitcomb said. The sarcasm in his voice was completely lost on Connors. Connors lost no time in doing so. The detective chief inspector made him nervous at the best of times, but on this case, he seemed positively put out. Besides, he was feeling a bit peckish and could do with a nice cup of tea and a bite to eat. Well, he's good to have around when we need some muscle, WPC Sanders commented graciously. Ha! And that's all he's good for. Still, he's a good lad, Whitcomb said. Whitcomb winced at the thought of Connors becoming a detective chief inspector in the future. The man had no business running an investigation. WPC Sanders would be a far better candidate. But she was a woman, and she would not get the chance to advance beyond her current status. Whitcomb and Sanders went through the bedrooms of the siblings, and that of the butler and his wife as well, but success was limited. It would have been nice to find some bloody clothes tucked away somewhere. But this murderer wasn't as obliging as the other killers he had faced in his career. The evening was fast approaching on this October night. Soon the sun would disappear, and the night would be cold. It might even snow, Whitcomb thought. While he didn't relish the thought of being stranded here, He also didn't want to leave and allow a killer to escape. Whitcomb had the butler make up a bedroom for him. The man blinked rapidly behind his glasses and hesitated slightly before nodding and doing as he was told. Suspicious, Whitcomb thought again. Whitcomb sent the other two home, instructing Sanders to develop the photographs and bring them back early in the morning. Connors was to fill the car's tank with petrol and make sure the vehicle was equipped to deal with a tire puncture. Connor may not be a great copper, but he was good with cars. As he settled in for the night, Whitcomb thought of the suspects. They all had motive, and he knew that one of them had to be the murderer. The butler and his wife knew more than they were letting on, but they were guilty of no bigger a crime than loyalty to the family. The kitchen staff and maids were tight-lipped as well, but Whitcomb was sure that they knew nothing of the murder of old Mrs. Ainsley. Even the gardeners and the handymen had precious little to say about it all, probably because they had nothing of import to tell. Whitcomb sighed and turned out the light. Whitcomb was up early the next morning, well before the three Ainsley siblings. He wandered into the kitchen to see about getting a cup of tea. He found Connors there, chatting amiably with the cook and the maids. They all quickly scraped back their chairs and stood up when Whitcomb entered. Whitcomb waved his hand, gesturing for them to all sit down. He gave Connors an appreciative nod of the head. The man was not lazy, he thought. WPC Sanders is in the library, sir. She has those photographs, Connors said. Whitcomb patted him on the shoulder and told him to carry on, by which he meant that Connors should continue to have a chat and a cuppa, staying out of Whitcomb's way. WPC Sanders did not stand when Whitcomb entered the library. She was studying the panoply of photographs that she had laid out across the ventral table in an impressively large library. Whitcomb was slightly stunned at the sheer size of the room and the thousands of books it contained. Rich folk, he mused, lived much differently than he did. "Good morning, Dad," Sanders said as she continued to scan the photographs. "I am DCI Whitcomb when we're working, young lady. I am your loving and generous dad when we are off duty. You would do well to remember that," Whitcomb said with some asperity. He loved his daughter, but he didn't like that she had to see such a gruesome sight yesterday. It made him testy. He didn't like having to tell his wife that their daughter had seen a dead body. It made him testy. He didn't like that his daughter had to go home and tell her husband that she had seen more blood than anyone should have to see. It made him testy. "Sorry, Dad. DCI Whitcomb, sir." Sanders looked up and grinned at her father and her superior at work. She was not above a little needling. "Enough with the pleasantries. What do you see in these pictures?" Sanders stood up and directed Whitcomb to a set of photographs near her. "You can see that the old lady was killed at the desk. No blood trail, just splatters and spray. Except in this one area, very little blood." "So," Whitcomb said. "So, the killer cut through the jugular and the blood spurted on him," Sanders said. "Or her." "I don't think it was a woman," Sanders said. "It takes some strength to get the knife completely through the neck." Whitcomb looked through the photographs and nodded. "Let's sit down, have some tea, and go through the evidence," Whitcomb said. "Righto, DCI Whitcomb, and maybe a biscuit. I'm famished," Sanders said. DC Connors was instructed not to interrupt the other two officers while they were locked away in the library. He was to continue the all-important work of chatting with the help. Connors nodded seriously and did as he was told. He was especially interested in chatting with the maid who had found old Mrs. Ainsley. She was young, pretty, and available. "Your thoughts," Whitcomb started. "William Ainsley, the eldest. He and his brother Rupert have a consulting business. Legal experts, they call themselves. They have a scrubby little office off of the high street, and they consult 2 times a week. They bring in less money than you pay me, Sanders said, grinning at her dad. The Queen pays you, he said. Right. South. They basically live off of their trust fund while living here for free. The daughter? Estella. She was married for 20 years. Husband died in a motor accident 3 years ago. She also has a trust fund. She also lives here for free. I have a feeling that the mother didn't want them here, Whitcomb said. Probably true. Look at these photographs. The mother didn't have a picture of any of her kids, but she has several of her late husband. The kids all have a picture of their mother. It's the exact same picture. Someone had copies made of a photograph, stuck them in nice silver frames, and hey presto, job done. One of them is a murderer. True. I plump for one of the boys, Dad. They have the muscle to carry it off. I'm not your dad right now. Also, whoever the killer is has bloody clothes to dispose of and a guilty conscience to assuage. Sanders nodded, then looked at her dad. She knew what was coming. Did you ask them? Whitcomb nodded. And? William claims that Rupert had to have done it. Rupert swears that Estella has a murderous streak in her and that she did it. Estella knows in her heart that William is the type to kill the old lady. Convenient, Sanders said. Quite. So, we need to find some bloody clothes. Maybe try to get one of the staff to tell us more than they have so far, Sanders said. A voice spoke from the entrance to the library. I don't reckon you'll find any bloody clothes, or the killer. Sanders and Whitcomb looked up, surprised. Surprise turned to amazement. D.C. Connors strode into the library and sat down, looking at his comrades. Explain yourself, Connors, Whitcomb said severely. He didn't like that Connor had come into the library unawares, and he especially didn't like what Connors said. Connors plopped a book on the table, leaned forward, and spoke. I was questioning that maid what saw the body. Jenny, you see. Strolling through the garden. I saw you 2 lovebirds. Sanders poked at Connors. Like I says, Connors continued, unperturbed. I was asking her about this and that. Lovely girl. We're going to the cinema Sunday afternoon. That's her afternoon off. Connors. Be a good lad and act like a copper, Whitcomb said sternly. Right. So we get to talking about books. She has this cracking good book here, and she hands it to me. It's a murder mystery set on a train. The Oriental Express. The Orient Express, Sanders said, reading the title. That one, yeah. Anyway, what happened was, there's a murder on the train. Turns out all the people on the train had a hand in killing this bloke what killed a baby. This dandified detective figures it out. Frenchman, I think. Belgian, Whitcomb muttered. So there's the story. The book belongs to the family. Jenny tells me that all the kids read it. The butler, too. Okay, so we continue to walk. I find a burn pile near the gardener's cottages. I dig through it and find burnt clothes. I tell her I got to get back and tell you. So we start back. Well, soon as we leave, I spot a gardener stoking up that fire again. I rush back, but it's too late. Everything is ashes by now. Uh-huh. Continue, Whitcomb said softly. He had a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach. Well, sir, then there's the lawyer chap. The what? The lawyer chappie for the old lady. The old lady called him on the blower and told him to step on down here on Wednesday. She wanted to stanchially alternate her will. Alter. Yes, sir, that one. The kids all were there in the living room and they all heard the call to the lawyer chap. So did the butler. And then the kids all go to the library and shut the door. They're in there for a couple of hours. Which is strange, Jenny says, 'cause they don't really like each other all that much. South, that's that. Whitcomb and Sanders nodded, deep dejection on their faces. They were all in on it, including the help. Yes, sir. Jenny tells me the old lady was miserly and didn't pay them much at all, but the kids always gave them money to help them out. Jenny in on it too? Sanders asked. I reckon so, but I still like her. We're stepping out and don't try to stop me, Connors said determinedly. She's guilty of murder, Whitcomb said. I don't reckon she stuck the old lady, Connors said. She knows who did it, boy. I reckon I'm fine with that. I have to let you go then. I can't have a man on the force who knows wrongdoing and lets it go. Connors nodded. I'll work for my dad. Good money to be had in fixing automobiles. It all fit. Everyone colluded to kill the old lady. Everyone was guilty. Nothing, though, could be proven. The murderers were known, yet escaped the justice of the law. They did not escape karmic justice, however. Within a year, all of the siblings were dead. Both boys died from eating tainted fish paste. The woman fell down the stairs at the mansion and died of a broken neck. All of the deaths were suspicious, but nothing could be proven. Curiously, Jenny produced evidence in the form of letters from her father and her mother, a former scullery maid at the Ainsley residence, that showed she was the illegitimate daughter of the late Mr. Ainsley. These letters were produced a few days after the death of the last sibling. She inherited everything. Jenny and ex-PC Connors were married soon thereafter. DCY Whitcomb and WPC Sanders did not attend the wedding, of course. They did not care to consort with murderers, not in it for the money. I was a hacker for almost as long as I can remember. Even as a kid, I lived to mess around with computers, programming, writing and cracking codes, and surfing to the darkest edges of the internet. What I couldn't learn from manuals, chat rooms, message boards, or friends I pretty much just figured out on my own. So early on I knew that hacking would make me way more money than flipping burgers at Mickey D's, earning a college diploma, or even scoring a high-paying job on Wall Street, and with a lot less of the mess and stress that usually accompanies your average 9-to-5 gig. But it was never about money, and things have changed since then, which was why I'd retired. For obvious reasons, I can't tell you my name. And after you read this, you won't be able to trace it back to my IP address it was sent from, since I've developed and used a multi-level super encryption masking and scrubbing device to send this screed. So, why am I taking the risk of getting back into the game, stepping out of the shadows and into the grid by divulging this secret to the New York Times? Because of the way they've ruined it for all of us. I've had enough and just can't stomach it anymore. Who are they, you ask? In 2 words, today's hackers. These hackers today. They've no respect and are almost always in it only for the money. When I was in the hacking game, it was all about changing the world and making a difference. Sure, every now and then we'd line our own pockets a bit, with enough to cover expenses and then some. But for me, unlike them, it wasn't about the money. Maybe it's just the lone wolf versus mob mentality. Today's hackers are not only creating chaos, but they make no distinction of who it is directed toward. For them, there are no good or bad guys, only easy pickings. And because they do that, it reflects poorly upon our past and present hacker communities as a whole. It's their ransomware attacks that really piss off most of us legit hackers. Nowadays, the bigger their haul, the more likely these greed-fueled Robin Hoodish banditos will invest it in specialization and franchising. They've certainly gotten better at it over the years. Remember the Colonial Pipeline assault? It may have not been the most costly hack attack from 2021 to 2022. Only $4.4 million was made from that hack. But the downtime caused by lost business and revenue was far more financially damaging to them than the ransom size. The WannaCry virus was far bigger in the number of computers it infected, 300,000 plus, and resulted in $6 billion USD of damage, albeit the blackmail payout dollar size wasn't the top dollar in brides for that period. Well, I, for one, want to put a stop to it now. Here's a short list of today's greatest hacker hits. Coming in hot at number 1 for 2021 is the insurance company, Can Financial Corp, for a whopping $40 million, which was a record liberation money amount paid up to that point. The second was meat producer JBS's payment of $11 million US, followed by GPS system manufacturer Garmin for $10 million, an unidentified Austrian organization, $4.7 million, CWT Global Travel Services, $4.5, Brenntag, a chemical distributor, $4.4, Travelex, $2.3, resulting in the corporation's declared bankruptcy, fashion company Fat Face Ltd, $2.0, and then $1.14 million extorted from San Francisco's University of California. Do the math and tally it up. That's a grand total of nearly $85 million US. As 2022 began, so did more digital assaults, beginning with the FlexBooker data breach on January 3rd. The Red Cross charity organization was the next innocent victim. Then came Crypto.com, multiple Credit Suisse banks, universities, hospitals, and even the Costa Rican government. Now, with nearly 36 other major thefts occurring thus far in a year, with still 3 months to go, it's really getting out of hand, isn't it? When today's hackers set their sights on specific ransom amounts, they normally take into account several factors. 1. The size of the infected network. 2. The target's overall net worth, including revenue and clients' accounts held in escrow. 3. The plane of data sensitivity being breached, and that's the way they do it. It not only hurts organizations and businesses out there that put good into the world, but even reputable hackers such as me. Therefore, this really has to stop, and there's only one way to paralyze today's hackers dead in their tracks, to halt them from fermenting further mischief. So, what's a respectable hacker of yesteryear ever to do these days? Basically, the way I'd decided to deal with it is not stooping to their level. That was up until the day when I had this idea. We, the good guy hackers of yesterday, need to band together and go after all the bad guy hackers of today to fight fire with fire. In other words, globally, the good must unite with one another to go after these nefarious computer criminals to hit them where it'll hurt the most. We hack the bad guys. I've been developing a unique virus that'll infect their devices and which would A, identify offenders so the rest of the world could detect them and out these blackmailers, B, temporarily lock down their software until the threat's resolved, and C, permanently disable and damage beyond repair any hardware used by chronic repeat offenders to stop them and wipe out their access to easy cash flow. With every day that's passed, I got closer to my goal, to halt and hurt today's malicious hackers. And now, I feel I may have cracked that code to allow me access via a back door in all computers that'll leave those greedy bastards defenseless. I'm almost there. And come tomorrow, my friends, sweet revenge. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator, I'm back, Marie Antoinette. Squat, beige and Soviet. The Marie Antoinette apartments stood against the stale gray Minneapolis sky. Irony of the worst kind, he thought. blandly ugly and unconscious. He would take exquisitely self-aware irony any day over this 3-story architectural monstrosity, classed up with tacked-on Ionic Greek columns, harsh blue LED Christmas lights wrapped inexpertly around them, canned Christmas classics pumping through the air. God, this place was only better than minimum security prison by a hair. But it was all he could afford now, so he'd just have to lower his eyes and his standards every time he approached. He tried to avoid the other people in the building, but a few of the near indigent souls, especially the family across the hall, insisted on pestering him with their lowbrow holiday cheer, the cheap gift of homemade cookies, the invitation of a seat at their dinner table on Christmas night on the flip side of a child's crude drawing of a Christmas tree slipped under his door. All this might have been more bearable if anyone he knew now understood why the Marie Antoinette apartments pained his soul, filled him with righteous rage. He'd certainly never get that from his obtuse, court-appointed therapist, a small, garish woman whose office and clothing reeked of TJ Maxx. So, he amused himself by using up their 50 minutes, complaining about how much he hated living there. His fingers itched to blow the place up, her told her, to set it alight. She told him there were healthier ways to channel and examine his negative emotions, so he could eventually let them go. He needed to think about what the Marie Antoinette represented to him, she told him, to look deeper, and to perhaps think about its positive attributes instead. This made him laugh hysterically. How much deeper can I go than living inside the damned building? Should I dive into the meaning of my laminate, faux wood floors and Formica kitchen counters, the rancid smell of old cooking that oozes from the graying, cracked walls studded with nail holes and abandoned archaeological remnants of tape from all the miserable souls who inhabited the purgatory before me? How about the rust-stained, leaking toilet and body oil-marked tub? Should I look for Rorschachs in its grimy patterns? That's not what I meant, she said quietly. And you know it. Well, I cherish my negative emotions, he said, suddenly tired. They're the only things keeping me going these days. Till near morning, a couple of weeks before Christmas, after one too many sleeping pills, he had a vivid dream. It started out of focus as he dragged himself toward the Marie Antoinette, bearing his usual cloak of heavy gray resignation, and pushed hard against the main door, as he always had to. Only this time, the door sprang open, and instead of jarring, cold Christmas music, warm strains of exquisite chamber music vibrated through him. All came into focus. The entryway had grown to twice its size, the gray, nondescript industrial carpet replaced with a glowing mahogany parquet floor. Instead of aluminum mailboxes and a frameless wall mirror on either side of the narrow space, giant gilt mirrors reflecting golden candlelight and gold and cream fleur-de-lis silk wallpaper covered the walls. The walls heaved outward until the room became what it wanted to be, a grand palace ballroom, complete with gently tinkling, candle-lit chandeliers. A ballroom for him alone. The effect was ostentatious, but stunning, the way his ex-wife had decorated their homes in the city, on the island, at the lake, near the slopes, their homes for every preposition, all gone now. He dream-prayed he had died and gone to heaven, but he awoke to the same ordinary life, the drab apartment, a shift at the same greasy job, and another boring session after it with his therapist, the only person he ever said more to than, "Can I take your order, would you like fries with that?" A woman he would have sneered at, if not ignored, in his old life, and would again someday when his luck turned. Would he tell her about his dream? He decided he would. It seemed safe enough, wasn't about the past, the present, or even the future. It was just a dream. But was it? As his workday dragged on, the customers who filed into the restaurant looked at him, smiling with something more, it seemed to him, than mere pre-Christmas cheer. He began to wonder if the dream wasn't a message. Maybe his luck was about to turn. He'd paid his dues after all. That old feeling began to tingle again. By the time his 4 o'clock appointment with TJ, as he'd taken to calling her, even to her face, arrived, he'd decided he must keep the dream to himself until he knew more. He had to get through the session, get home, eat a little something, and take his sleeping pills. "You seem distracted today," TJ said late in the hour. "Something happened this week?" Same old, same crappy job, same crappy apartment." He shifted his gaze to the pressed board, "Believe" plaque near the window before she could read him, but she was astute, this small, tacky woman. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw her cock her head. "You're not complaining like you usually do. Did something change?" "Like I said, nope. Maybe I've adjusted to living in a shithole, I don't know." He attempted to give her an aw shucks grin, but felt his face contorting in weird ways, so he scrambled to throw her a bone. "Have I told you about my neighbors across the way?" He leaned back and sneered, coming up with an awful lie. "I'd swear to God she's killing him sometimes, and man, I wish she'd succeed so I can get some rest." "What do you think it means, Doc, that I don't care if he dies?" TJ sighed and drummed her red fingernails on her thigh. "It's Clauso 450, she said. "Let's just pick this up next week." Tilda. The dream started the same as before. Heavy, quotidian dread as he approached the stunted building, growing excitement and wonder as it opened to a Versailles-like hall of mirrors. But this time, the hall was filled with people. Giant people. People twice his height, in silken 18th century finery, swirling and spinning around the room, wind-up dolls and white wigs with faces he recognized. His old clients, wealthy people he'd cheated and stolen from for years, people he'd fooled into being his friends, people from the life he wanted back desperately. He tried to speak, to get their attention, but nothing came, not even air. As he watched, the dancers grew larger. Wait, no, he grew smaller. He was shrinking, becoming more and more insignificant. An insect, a speck, dirt. He would always be dirt. Tilda. He stumbled through the rest of the week, his nights vast and dreamless. TJ seemed surprised to see him in the waiting room early but said nothing. He sat on her couch, cleared his throat. "I had this dream," he said, "that my building became a palace, but one I will never have access to again." His voice shook. She handed him the tissue box. "Yes." He gave her a brief description of the dream. "What do you think it means?" she asked. "Isn't that your job?" "No," she said simply, and crossed her arms, waiting. "I guess. I don't think I'll ever again have the life I had before." "I don't think," he said, swallowed. "I deserve it." "No," she said again, not clarifying what she meant, which oddly made him feel more respect for her. "So, what now?" "That's up to you." "Well, a hint might be nice," he whispered, wanting to scream. He swallowed. "You are my damn therapist after all." "Okay. What do you miss most about your old life?" "Not from in here." She tapped her head. "Not ego. From here." She tapped her chest. "Heart. What do you really miss?" He shook his head. "I don't know. Without those things on the table, nothing. I mean, I don't have kids. My ex-wife was a money-grubbing bitch, and my friends... Shit, I didn't really have those. Maybe luck. But that's not what you mean either. I know what you're getting at, but you're barking up the wrong tree. She smiled, the first full smile he'd seen from her since they'd met, before she'd gotten to know him. I don't think so. I think you're getting somewhere. Maybe your dream was telling you more than you think. Like I've said before, dig deeper, go further. The answers are there, inside that building and inside you. He choked back a snarky, whatever, Obi-Wan, and nodded at her. Glancing at the clock above the door, he stood, smoothing his sweaty palms against his jeans. Hold on. She held up a finger and smiled again. I have something for you. He stared, not comprehending. She turned to fish something out of a paper bag, then turned back, holding out a flat package wrapped in green tissue paper and red curly ribbon. Of course, Christmas was only 4 days away. He stammered, cheeks reddening. I didn't get you anything. He didn't know why he was embarrassed, which only made him blush harder. She laughed. I was not expecting you to. Don't worry about it, it's no big deal. Merry Christmas. Merry, yeah, he said, looking down at his name. Jeb, in black marker on the paper, an inexpertly drawn holly leaf and berries below it. A feeling spread, not altogether unpleasant, replacing ungenerous thoughts about the cheesy gift she'd likely procured at TJ Maxx. Thank you, Geraldine, he mumbled and bumbled out the door. Tilda. He worked Christmas Eve day, took the bus, and trudged home as the sun set again too early, the day again too short, carrying his fast food dinner and a bottle of California Pinot Noir he'd splurged on. It was only 4, but it felt like midnight, and his near-unfurnished apartment felt more featureless and tired and depressing than prison ever had been. Because it was his choice to leave it so, he realized. He had nowhere else to go, so he busied himself with eating and drinking, the food cold and congealed, and the wine's mediocrity disappointing. Folding up the empty, redolent burger paper and fries box, he glanced at the present Geraldine had given him, still unopened on the kitchen counter. He wasn't sure whether he'd saved it because it was his only gift, or because he didn't really care about it. Either way, he might as well open it now. He washed his greasy hands in the kitchen sink and poured another glass of wine. He picked up the gift and carefully untied the red ribbon, did his best not to tear the green paper as he picked at the tape, then slid the paper away. Not a tacky nothing after all, but a green, leather-bound book, like the ones his ex-wife had bought by the shelf-load from antiquaries to decorate their homes, curated for color and size rather than content. But this wasn't inert decoration. It was chosen for him to read. He snorted. Crime and punishment. He knew the gist of the story, though he suspected he'd have to read it to get the nuances she intended. Funny, he found himself looking forward to it. His doorbell rang. Book in hand, still smiling with surprised respect for Geraldine. He answered the door to find the frazzled woman from across the hall. Hi, Jeb, right? Her grin was crooked, a little shy, infectious. He nodded, and she said, Marissa, you never responded to our invite to dinner for tomorrow evening. Can you make it? We'd be glad to have you. We're making turkey with all the fixings. A couple other neighbors are coming. He considered this only a moment, tasting the oily coating of his pitiful dinner as he licked his lips. You know what? Yes, Marissa. I'd be honored. Can I bring anything? Just yourself. She grinned again. 6 o'clock sharp, if that's okay, because of the Munchkins' early bedtime. Sure, he said, finding himself grinning in response. 6. Great. She glanced at his book, then inside the doorway at his near-bare apartment. Looks like a bookshelf is in order, huh? Maybe even a sofa. She laughed. He He couldn't help but laugh with her. "Yes," he said, "it's time." Again, that soft, warm lightness pushing out something hard and heavy he hadn't even known was there. What was it? Only later, while lying on his second-hand mattress on the floor, after he'd read the long first part of the leather-bound book about young, impoverished Raskolnikov scheming and rationalizing his decision to murder a pawnbroker for her money, did it come to him. Like Raskolnikov, he'd lost something along the way, something essential and tender that had shriveled to a hard stone inside him once he began to drip Ponzi scheme money. Something poor little rich girl Marie Antoinette likely never knew her entire tragic, gold-plated life. That night he dreamt again, a simple dream. The Marie Antoinette apartments remained an ugly pedestrian building, but he entered with lightness, that warmth down to his bones. He greeted neighbors in the lobby by name, delivered groceries to the housebound old lady down the hall, went into his simply but warmly furnished apartment to make himself a nourishing meal. Christmas morning, he leapt out of bed. If he was lucky, he might find gifts for the children across the hall before noon. To live a life posthumously. The casket was oak with a mahogany finish. A yellow cut sunflower lay haphazardly between the fingers of the body, the most color offered in the small, run-down church. Only 3 people entered the room. Only 3 took seats in the front aisle, chipped gas cans and matchboxes in hand. The uniformity of the black outfits made the room feel smaller, duller. The only respite was the small, almost seamless lines of dark gray thread interwoven into the fabric of each person's blazer. An imperfection, yes, but a consolation for him nonetheless. Each blazer told a different story: missed meals and burning anger, a car, a sunflower field, and unfortunate truths, old fortunes and new beginnings. That was what they were. Memories of a time when he lived, stories into the person he was. So as he watched the 3 effortlessly coat the aisle seats and checkered floors with oil, watched as the papers of his existence become pliant under the weight of the foreign substance, he thought back to a time when he simply was. The calm before the storm. It is bright and damp. A cold draft whistles through the broken roof of the rundown house. The only warmth apparent was from the overused patchwork blanket and the 2 sizes to big black blazer, the price tag still attached. Silas felt along the side of the stiff material, wincing at the tear already present from the rusted sharp metal of old Mac's wired fence. Damn it, my first big job, and I already made a mess. His father would not be happy. He got up and slipped down the stairs from the rickety attic, stopping shortly as he heard the hushed voices in the kitchen. He readied himself to flee before carefully peeking through the gap in the door. "You said you would stop. You promised me you wouldn't steal or sell again, that when the kids were born, we would start fresh." Mama clenched the ladle in her hand, the remaining soup on it, slowly dripping onto the floor. Silas's stomach clenched at the wasted food. Mama never wasted food. Father seemed to realize this too, as his large shoulders seemed to shrink under his wife's eyes. The gun he was cleaning in his hands, less a threat compared to her ever-growing anger. "We did. I have." But this time it was personal. He attacked this family's integrity. He questioned our worth. I had the money we could have paid, but he wouldn't let us. So we left, taking only what we rightly deserved. He attacked the gun with a new sense of purpose, the black residue coming off further, staining his stubby fingers, leaving the faint scars still visible on them to almost glow against his sunburnt skin. They both became still, the anger permeating the room colder, clearer. It felt like a line had been drawn, with one person on each side. It felt permanent. Then know this, Antonio. We have followed you around as you have shepherded us like sheep to the slaughter, purposefully ignorant. I wonder when we are dead and gone, if you will still try to talk of integrity." Silas's stomach clenched and rumbled. He wished he was somewhere else. What once was still is. It was windy and hot, the moon the only source of light. The leather shift grated against his hand as the car flew around the corner. Fuck, 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 the police were gaining. "Damn it, Silas, push it!" Creed's voice echoed around the car, his brother's patience waning. It felt like he was stuck underwater. Everything seemed to merge into one. His black blazer stuck to his skin as perspiration slowly fell down his neck. His fingers shook, and his pulse raced. Breathing felt hard. It was too hot. It was too sticky. It was too dark. Everything was just too much. Houses passed in a blur as they raced away from the inevitable. The sound of the siren receded and returned like waves upon the shore. They were coming to the end of the street. Beside them, hidden behind the buildings, was a field of sunflowers. Their brightness diminished due to the enveloping darkness. Ahead was a dusted-out dirt road where they would most certainly be arrested. Creed's tattooed fingers came into his line of view, his pointer extended to the side of Silas. "Turn here, down this side street. Once you get to the end, drive straight into those flowers and cut the engine." The car lurched to the left, the wheels leaving the ground from the sudden turn, before gravity took over, and Silas rammed the vehicle into the complying field and buried the flowers under the tracks of his tires. Silas turned sharply once more before turning off the ignition. A loud silence consumed the car as everything settled, the void only filled by the slight tapping sound of their boots and stuttering breaths. The siren passed, taking with it Silas's anxiety, but not his anger. He waited a few before speaking. "I thought this was meant to be a small job. No cops, no competition, just a simple drop-off." He watched Creed pull at the tie around his throat, his ample fingers moving quickly and with purpose. It was. Dad knew that Anthony would pull one on him, so he asked me to switch the cargo before handing it over. Anything the cops find will come back to him, not us. Silas scoffed. "So he told you but didn't bother to tell me. We could have been caught, or worse, we could have died. I have an econ paper due, and instead of doing that, I am wasting away in a car with someone who would rather have no future." The veins on Creed's head throbbed as his anger increased. "No future? This family is your future. How many times do I have to tell you that? Ondiam vai, Ozotra's sagging." The sound of Creed's phone ringing stopped Silas from responding as he listened with bated breath to the sharply spoken conversation. The awkward silence rose as Creed finished his phone call, both boys now leaning on their slightly open doors, the cool breeze doing nothing to calm the blistering rage from their prior conversation. "Dad said he will be here in 30. We've been asked to wait." Creed pocketed his phone, a scowl resting on his face. Silas looked at the sunflowers beside him, watching them sway and jitter like puppets on a string. Control or be controlled, as his father always said. It was a pity he wasn't the latter. He curled his fingers in feeling at the moon-shaped scars on his palm, forcing down the words he wished he could say, and closed his eyes. "Yeah, I guess we wait." The end. The room was ablaze in orange and yellow, the snap of the fire against the brawny wood aisle seats and fabric curtains like the crescendo in a song, dramatic and loud. In all the abruptness and carnage, Silas felt at peace. Looking down at his body, hair slicked back, black blazer on, Silas felt he could finally move on. The slow opening of the doors drew his attention back as he watched the backs of his family exit the burning church. A small hand rested itself on his shoulder. Its voice was soft and almost overtaken by the symphony of sounds made by the flames. "It is time." Silas took one final look at himself before turning and walking into the shadows. The bullet that Esther stopped. I shot Papa square in the heart, but he didn't die. That damn Bible he carried with him saved his life. I was considerable lucky that Papa had his axe at hand and that he kept it sharp. I picked it up. It was a heavy thing, so I swung with all my might and put it right through his head. Seeing his brains made me throw up. I moved away so it wouldn't get on Papa. That would be disrespectful. Papa was a big man. I couldn't bury him like that, so I started chopping off his arms and legs with the axe. I was down to the right leg when Sheriff Culverson showed up. Wouldn't you know it, he came to arrest Papa for stealing a couple of old lady Renner's chickens. Papa didn't have to worry about that now. Hell, he didn't have to worry about the drought or where his next bottle had come from either. I reckon I did him a favor, saving him from all that worry. Sheriff Culverson looked at me and looked at Papa. I done threw up again, so the smell was something terrible in the vicinity. I looked at the sheriff. He was a-shaking his head and had a sad look on his face. I reckon he didn't want to take a 19-year-old girl to jail. Especially me, seeing as how I was his daughter's best friend. Maybe he'll let Cassie visit me in jail. The jailhouse only had the one cell. That door a-clanking behind me sounded like what Mama would call ominous. I kinda know what that means by the words around it. Corn-tex, I think they call it. I would know a lot more if Papa would have let me go to school. He said girls don't need school. They need to learn how to cook and to clean and to please their man. I'm damn good at cooking and cleaning, but I don't think I know how to please a man. Papa was a man and he was never pleased. Oh Lord, here comes the sheriff and another man. I seen him around. Mr. King. He's always all duded up and talking fancy and smiling and swinging his walking stick around. I sure would like to catch me a man like that. I bet he don't beat his women. Not much, anyway. He ain't smiling now. I reckon I'm in a heap of trouble. Welp, Papa won't be slapping the tar out of me for my sins this time. Both men sat across the table from Esther. The sheriff had placed the gun that Esther had shot her dad with next to the Bible that had thwarted Esther's original plan. The metal gleamed in the harsh light of the room, sitting as silently as the three occupants. The ceiling fan squeaked quietly, not doing a very good job of cooling off the room. The open window allowed the sunlight to stream through, and a soft breeze brought a little relief from the heat, along with the scent of jasmine and dust. The harsh, unforgiving angles that the sun cast in the room matched Esther's mood. Esther reached for the wounded Bible. She wanted to feel the torn cover and open it up to inspect the damage. The sheriff pulled it towards him and opened it up before sliding it to Esther. The soft sigh of the Bible moving across the table sounded like the whisper of broken dreams. Notice anything? The sheriff leaned back and watched Esther closely. Esther inspected the Bible. The bullet had torn through a significant portion of the Old Testament. It had stopped at the book of Esther. Yes, sir. Esther stopped the bullet, I reckon. Mr. King smiled, though he didn't want to. The sheriff nodded his head and leaned forward. Don't you find that a little odd? Esther shook her head. That's your name, young lady. Mr. King spoke. His rich, resonant voice filled the room. Dust motes danced and the breeze quickened. Yes, sir. The men looked at each other impassively, but both were thinking the same thing. The girl was thick-headed. Mr. King pointed to Esther's face. "Your dad do that?" Her black eye and a swollen nose did all the testifying for her. "Yes, sir. Told me I should have caught a man by now, and he weren't going to feed no old maid much longer." "He been drinking?" Sheriff Culverson leaned back, crossing his arms. He already knew the answer. "Yes, sir. Mama always says that Papa only drinks on days endin' with a Y. I reckon that's true." Esther played with her hair, twirling it between two fingers. She looked away from the men and gazed outside, lost in her own thoughts. "So you decided to shoot him?" "Yes, sir. But the Bible stopped the bullet." "Yes, sir." Mr. Kind leaned forward and stared at Esther, causing her to blush. "That was when you decided to take the axe to his head?" Esther stopped playing with her hair and sat still for a moment before answering. "I suppose so. Papa would have killed me if I didn't kill him." "You feared for your life?" Mr. King continued to stare intently at Esther. "Yes, sir." Mr. King abruptly stood up and shook the sheriff's hand. "I have all I need." He left quickly, so quickly that it startled Esther. She looked at the retreating back and worried that she had offended such a gentleman. "Am I going to get the chair?" The sheriff stood slowly, as if it hurt him to do so. He closed his eyes for a moment before answering. His voice, when he spoke, was softer than Esther had ever heard it. "Number, you'll get 25 years in the women's prison in San Antone. Minimum." Esther started counting on her fingers. "You'll be about 44, Esther." "Damn. I reckon I'll be too old to catch a man by that time." The sheriff felt his chest tighten just a little at those words. "And Mama? How old'll she be?" "How old is she now?" Esther paused, deep in thought. "Says she was born in 1901. Then she'll be about 60. Esther nodded, standing and smoothing out her skirt. "Reckon she'll take me back when I get out?" The sheriff scratched his forehead and looked at the floor. "I don't know, honey. I just don't know." "Dusra. They're calling us heroes. The newspapers, that is. I suppose we are, but I don't know that I feel heroic. I do, however, feel a difference in me now that Papa's dead. Liberation would be the word. Papa would have hit me if I had ever used that word in front of him. Papa had been drinking, of course, and smacking Mama around. Cassie and I were hiding out in my room, wondering when it would all stop. At one point, I heard Mama scream. That's when I went out to investigate. Papa was pointing a gun at Mama. I didn't even think about what to do. I just did it. I stepped in front of Mama just as Papa shot. The bullet hit my Bible. Yes, I carried a Bible with me, right over my heart, but only when I was wearing overalls. It was fortunate that I was wearing them at this point. I staggered backward and fell. The impact of the bullet stunned me. Mama fell as well, trying to hold me up. That's when Cassie came charging out of the room and started to wrestle with Papa, trying to get the gun out of his hand. We heard another shot. Papa took a bullet to the gut. He died 2 hours later, in a lot of pain. Cassie stood and fairly sprinted out of the house. She came back a few minutes later with her dad, the sheriff. The look on his face was one that will not soon leave me. Pinched and drawn, with worry written clearly in the eyes. Mama should have never been home. She was supposed to go to San Antonio to see her sister, but Papa beat her so bad the night before that she refused to go. I believe that Papa beat her so severely so she wouldn't go. He was like that. Cassie shouldn't have been there either. Her father told her never to go to my house when my Papa was around, but Cassie often defied her father. Her father was so relieved that Cassie wasn't injured or killed that he never punished her. On the contrary, he hugged her tightly and kissed her on the cheek. I had never seen him do that before. I'm supposed to write a story for the newspapers. The one in San Antonio wants to give me and Cassie $50 each for our story. An astounding sum. Some rich people in San Antonio also want to give us full scholarships for college. Imagine going to college. It's in Denton, but that's even better. Cassie and I can get away from the blight of the hill country and experience a different kind of life. A different kind of life. I'm filled with a substantial happiness, and I wonder when it will leave. Never, I hope. The real hero is Mama, and I'll make sure the newspapers know that. All those years of insisting that I go to school, even when Papa beat her for her sass. He called it that anyway. It was grit and toughness and love. I'll call it the stuff that heroism is made of. That has a nice ring to it, and it's the truth. All 3 steps to the elevated porch squeaked under Mr. King's tread, though the man was not heavy. Like the rest of the porch area, they needed paint. Rusted nail heads poked out of the wood, loosened by years of neglect and hill country weather. The evening was soon to turn into dusk. Just spoke to the judge. Cassie ain't to be charged. He said she did us all a favor by shooting that man. Sheriff Culverson didn't show it, but a wave of relief flooded his body. He relaxed a little and felt his breath coming easier. Mr. King sat down and lit a cigar, offering one to the sheriff. Both men took some time to light their cigars, ensuring that they had a proper draw. This was not a task, but a ritual, and it was not to be taken lightly. The sheriff went inside his house and returned in a few moments, bearing a bottle of whiskey and 2 small tumblers. Each man filled their glass to the amount desired and sipped. Mr. King grimaced at the first sip, then took a second, larger sip. I reckon she did us all a favor, sure, but it was an accident. I'm damn happy the judge was of the same mind, the sheriff said. He took another sip of whiskey and sat his glass down, concentrating on puffing his cigar and enjoying the news. You know, I'm surprised one of those women hadn't killed the man before. He sure liked to beat his women, Mr. King said. The mama, the sheriff said. Mr. King turned his head slightly. Pardon? The mama. She made that girl, Esther, get an education. I hear she took a beating or 2 for her daughter. Damn fine woman in my opinion. Mr. King nodded and smiled. He had already heard the news. You went to visit the widow, I hear. The sheriff glanced at Mr. King and then quickly glanced away. Offer my condolences in an official capacity. The sun had disappeared behind the horizon, bestowing faint light and beautiful colors to the sky. Fireflies came out of hiding, their pinpricks of light giving the large front lawn a magical appearance, as if fairies were in attendance, as if a miracle had been bestowed. You were there for 2 hours, Sheriff. That's a lot of, condoling. The sheriff turned and stared at Mr. King, his steely blue eyes narrowing a little. Mr. King laughed and hastened to explain. The old biddies in town, you know what they're like. Most of 'em had you and the widow making a baby during your visit. Vicious old cats, the sheriff spat out the words. Makes sense, though. You and the widow. Esther and Cassie are best friends. They'd be tickled pink to become sisters, so to speak. And the widow's a fine, strong woman. You done have us at the altar. Mr. King tamped the ashes from his cigar onto the porch and scuffed them with his boots. He poured himself more whiskey and watched the fireflies perform their chaotic, beautiful dance. Your wife's been gone for 12 years. I reckon you grieved enough, Sheriff. I figure the widow's grievin' was non-existent. Can't really miss a man that beats you, can you? The sheriff poured himself another 3 fingers of whiskey and stood at the railing beside Mr. King. He sighed and turned to Mr. King, handing him a dollar bill. I'm hiring you for a 2-minute consultation, Mr. King. Mr. King looked at the bill and put it in his breast pocket. What's on your mind, Sheriff? The sheriff paused for a moment, trying to get the words out of his mouth. I heard Esther and Cassie talking one day last year, just before Christmas. Esther was telling her that she wanted to shoot her daddy dead so he'd stop beating her mama. Well, that froze me. Mr. King looked at the sheriff, a thoughtful expression creasing his face and pursing his lips. I figure she would have done it one day, Sheriff. I guess Cassie took care of that, though. The sheriff sighed. I reckon. So why the dollar? We got attorney-client confidentiality now, right? Mr. King laughed, nodding his head. Yes, very clever, Sheriff, but I wasn't going to divulge that little piece of information anyway. I expect a receipt when you get to the office tomorrow. Yes, of course. Come by after work, Sheriff, and I'll buy us a couple of beers. I seem to have an extra $1 in my pocket. The night darkened and the breeze stilled. Even the fireflies slowed down. Soon they were gone, letting the darkness of the night have its way. Both men remained silent. Cigar smoke curled and drifted upwards past the porch lights, disappearing into the blackness. Mr. King left after finishing his whiskey. See you tomorrow, Sheriff, and I'll expect a wedding invitation. I want that receipt, young man. The rest of the night passed as it should have. Frogs croaked lazily, crickets chirped, and lights winked out one by one across the countryside. 2 young ladies were dreaming of adventures at college. One sheriff was thinking of matrimony, and one widow was contemplating the mysteries of fate and providence. The Bible with a bullet hole in it was, in due time, returned to its rightful owner. The whereabouts of the mangled Word of God is currently unknown. Kill the messenger. Sweetie, look, this was just delivered. It's from... My wife reads the card while unboxing the birthday present, peeling off red gift wrapping. Your Aunt Salome. That's nice. Wait, Aunt Salome? But... ... The red gift wrapping blooms into an orange fireball. The shockwave pushes me, shoves me, throws me hard into the wall. The screams from my wife's birthday party guests are muffled, as if I'm submerged in water deep below the surface. Aunt Salome. Only I know that she is not real. Aunt Salome is the code name for my dispatcher at Zarathustra. She is my sweet old sickly aunt who lives in a nursing home in rural middle of nowhere on the other side of the country, who sends cards for Christmas and birthdays, who has a Facebook account filled with photographs of her, an actress hired by Zarathustra, with me, her favorite nephew. And Where'she writes bot-generated old lady posts that periodically include a bat signal code phrase to activate me. Zarathustra thinks my marriage is an elaborate cover. They think I'm an unfeeling psychopath who built a facade of respectability by marrying a wholesome suburban everywoman, siring 2 adorably ordinary children. Zarathustra thinks it's all a front, and they're right. I am a psychopath. That's why I'm an effective tool for Zarathustra. I am unfeeling about my assignments. I'm rational, precise, calculating, manipulative, deceptive, effective. I don't make mistakes. I'm a machine. But they're wrong. My marriage is not a facade. It's real. It's the only real thing I have. It's not that I love my wife and my children. Love, like any emotion, is ultimately empty, easy to fake, meaningless. But my family is an extension of me. New limbs I've grown, like a salamander, new heads, like Hydra. If you hurt them, you hurt me. If you hurt me, I will hurt you. He's a slight man, narrow shoulders, thinning blonde hair, almost bald on top, wearing small round glasses with thick lenses. He's half my height, even in the Western boots with 3-inch heels. He walks with a strange gait, as if he is skipping. There's something jaunty about him. I follow him into the office building, staying far behind him since he knows me by sight. When he waves the key card to enter his office, I step up behind him and put the silenced gun barrel into the small of his back. "Hello again," I say. "You..." His eyes go wide behind the small glasses when I dig the barrel in a little harder. "How did you..." "Let's go!" Inside, it's a small office, but with a nice view of the skyline, well appointed with a large desk, an oversized leather executive chair, and 2 computer monitors on a credenza facing the windows. There's a fine layer of dust on the seat cushions of the 2 visitor chairs in front of the desk. No one comes to visit. "So," I say, "we meet again." "You asked how I knew. Well, I remembered the photographer hired by Zarathustra who took the pictures of me with the elderly actress playing the part of Aunt Salome. That photographer was you. When I found out that old lady actress died from natural causes, just a week after that photo shoot, but you didn't. 2 and 2 make 4. You're part of Zarathustra. I don't know what you mean. Zarathustra? I assumed you were a flunky, but that you could lead me to the next rung on the ladder to get to my handler. But now that I see this place, clearly, you are more than a flunky. I think you're Aunt Salome. Aunt Dash, you're my handler. Sit down. He sits down behind the desk. I keep standing, gun pointed at him. Why did you kill my wife? I didn't. Let me rephrase that. Why did you order the killing of my wife? Please, I didn't. It had all the markers of Zarathustra. In fact, it's the way I would have done it. Wait, I can explain. Will you allow me? He points, index finger over his shoulder, to the computer monitors. I have a message pre-recorded for this specific situation. It's from the leader of Zarathustra. The leader? Yes. May I? I nod. He swivels the office chair, turns his back to me, brings up web page, completely blank, except for a single open field and the text. Enter password, Z9 *. What's the password? I don't know, but I've been told that you do. He lifts the wireless keyboard from the credenza tray, swivels, and slides the keyboard across the wide expanse of the desk. I shift the gun to my left hand, still pointing the barrel at him. Yes, I do know a password that begins with Z9. The thing is, I'm the only one who does. I keep the gun trained on him as I key in the password. As soon as I enter the password, a video starts playing, and there he is, the leader of Zarathustra. My face. Congratulations, says my face in the video. The sacred game is at an end. The festivals of atonement are over. Since you're watching this video, you're ready for the next step. It's time to take out the middleman, kill the messenger. I shift my silenced gun back into my right hand, but I hesitate. Go ahead, my face on the video says. You don't need Aunt Salome anymore. A feather-light pressure on the trigger, a sound like a cough, a puff of smoke from the barrel, and there's a hole in the little man's forehead. His head snaps back, and he slumps over in the office chair. Aunt Salome is dead. The middleman is gone. The messenger has been killed, my face says. Now it's just you. Only you. All you. As it always was. You decide, as you always did. Only now you know that it has always been you making the choices. What's your next assignment? Who's your next kill? The screen goes blank. Outside the window, the skyline, the tall buildings full of people, a ghost's testimony. After the living and the dead decided to merge worlds, the Supreme Court was flooded with appeals. With coexist being a hot topic in the first half of the 21st century, most people thought it would be a great idea to create a union between the two worlds. They thought they'd get their loved ones back. They thought they'd get access to generational wisdom from their deceased elders back, and perhaps some old family recipes could finally resurface. People could only think of the missing pieces in their lives that they wanted to finally have sewn up with the help of a familiar, ghostly face around. It was an oversight, to say the least, that with ghosts being almost as accessible as the living, there would now be witnesses for crimes where before there had been none. It actually caused a lot of chaos across the criminal justice system, especially for police officers who had tampered with evidence to shut a case quickly, for gang members who'd offed witnesses to shut their mouths. And it was a goddamn headache for judges who had to reopen every murder case from the last several decades that now suddenly had a victim who could tell their side of the story. But for Jeremy Strout, it was a lifeline. He'd been sitting on death row for 15 years after being convicted of 4 heinous murders, his wife, and 3 children. At the time of his conviction, there'd been no one there to defend him, just whispers from neighbors who'd said they'd heard him yelling in his house hours before the bodies were discovered. It didn't help that he was the one who'd called 911 and then was found at the scene of the crime covered in their blood. It didn't help that he'd sought out anger management before in his past. Rumors swam through town like a broken dam, neighbors speculating that he hadn't wanted their 3rd child. That little Harley Sue was a mistake Mrs. Strout made Jeremy keep, and that he'd finally snapped under the pressure of 3 small children and a wife whose fertility had betrayed him. Jeremy had always denied the rumors, claiming that he loved his family. Sure, they had their problems, and he never denied the hardship of not only providing for 3 children under 5, but living under the same roof as them. Nevertheless, he remained adamant in his defense. He would never harm them. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough. Statistically, said the prosecutor, people are more likely to be killed by their spouse than any other person in the world. And of course, Mr. Strout could not leave his children to live after killing Mrs. Strout, because who would take care of the children while he was at work? And if he had not done it, then why so much blood, not only on his clothes, but in his fingernails, wedged between eyebrow hairs, and in the wrinkles of his temples? And the even bigger question, if Mr. Strout had not murdered his family, then who did? There had never been another suspect. The police never really took the time to consider one, their minds made up before they could produce an alternative. It really was easier just to blame the husband. What jury wouldn't go for that? Today, our jury gets to hear a new side to the story. Jeremy's defense attorney told the courtroom at his appeal hearing, nearly 2 decades after his family's murders. From Mrs. Strout's perspective, Mr. Alcott enticed the crowd with a smile that said he had a secret, one he was eager to share. Attorneys could be a bit performative in their speeches, and Mr. Alcott was no less confident. The union between the dead and the living truly did save some attorneys' careers, as it had not always been every day that they could produce eyewitness testimony that could turn a case on its heel. Some started getting big heads about it, as if they had more power than the judges, and Mr. Alcott's once regular-shaped head was slowly growing in size. Jeremy, who'd known him since his family's gruesome deaths, knew that Mr. Alcott came from a humble and passionate place. He just wanted to help people. And more than anything on this day, he wanted to help Jeremy. The only problem with ghosts as witnesses was time. The worlds were combined, yes, ghosts were all around. But time for the living and time for the dead, they existed on two separate lines, intersecting at points that were not always convenient. Ghosts floated from here to there to here, teleporting across space and time. And their biggest adjustment to being reunited with the living was adhering to the old third-dimensional clock. You could not simply tell a ghost to show up in court at 9 a.m. and expect them to find where that time existed for them. The closest thing living humans had to relate this ghostly state of nonlinear existence was to elderly people with dementia. They hopped from place to place, time to time, without any real sense of how they got there. Ghost therapists, a new occupation created by the psychologists, blended a team of living and dead to try to help condition ghosts into grasping the concept of earthly time. But like any therapy, it was not an immediate remedy. Realistically, Mr. Alcott could only hope that Mrs. Strout would appear in court. But there was no way to be certain she would find her way there at the right time and place of the court hearing. Yet still, he spoke as if there were not a single doubt in his mind. Today, we will get to hear an eyewitness account of the events that took place on October 26, 2023, from one of the victims' perspectives. And how grateful are we that it is now possible. Mr. Alcott turned to face Jeremy Strout, seated at the defense table, shackled at his wrists and ankles, both sets of chains locked in place by a hook on the tabletop and the floor. Jeremy was trembling, just as nervous as he was during his first trial, which certainly had not helped his case. He tapped his feet anxiously, and Mr. Alcott took his seat beside him. "Don't you worry, Jeremy. I've spoken to Mrs. Strout, and I know she wants to be here. She feels just awful that all of this has fallen on you. I have no doubt she will find her way here, even with those kids of yours keeping her busy. Who'd have thought dead kids could still be such a handful?" Ah! Jeremy didn't laugh, so Mr. Alcott cleared his throat. "She's got a wonderful therapist, Jeremy. They've been working really hard on timeliness so she can be here for you today. He's the best therapist around. He worked so hard when he was alive it nearly killed him. Ha, ha. But really, it was the alcohol that did it." Despite Mr. Alcott's poor humor, his assurances did give Jeremy hope. After all, that was all he had left. The courtroom remained mostly silent as the hours carried on, everyone waiting, now accustomed to the concept of ghostly testimonies, and also of their inability to make prompt appearances. If people had thought court cases dragged on before, waiting on a dead person to show up had made the old ways seem swift. Every so often, as the clock ticked, a ghost would find themselves in the pews alongside the other patient attendees, causing a stir in the crowd. An elderly man piped up around the second long hour, reminiscing. "I remember when they built this courthouse in 1949. Apparently, he had been a little boy with a dream of becoming the president one day. At the time, fascinated by the building's exterior columns and interior mahogany. On the third hour, a child ghostling chased a ball around the courtroom, giggling about how his dad used to work upstairs. On the fourth hour, a former janitor peeked his head in to see if the garbage needed to be changed. It was the fifth hour when the judge, who had spent nearly all of the hours engrossed in a book, announced that if Mrs. Strout did not find her way here in 10 minutes, her testimony would have to be rescheduled and the court would be adjourned. Jeremy's foot resumed its tapping. Mr. Alcott nudged him, winking. "She'll be here." Jeremy's hope was nearly run dry when the clock struck 5 hours and 11 minutes since the court hearing was set to start. The banging from the judge's gavel was still resounding, while a symphony of people gathering their things and sighing at the wasted day trickled across the room. All of it was at just the perfect volume for Mrs. Strout's meager voice to almost be missed. Almost. "Hello?" she said. "Hello? Did I make it on time?" The noise in the room was like a faucet sputtering out until it finally stilled. Everyone froze in their tracks and turned towards the voice to find an equally meager and transparent figure seated at the witness stand. When Jeremy laid eyes on her, she looked as beautiful as the day he married her. Not appearing in the form in which one died was a feature of ghosthood that all appreciated. "Senora," Jeremy whispered. At her name, the ghost frantically searched for its source. When she landed on Jeremy, relief softened and warmed her face. "Jeremy," she smiled. Then, as if her reason for being here suddenly rushed to her mind, she jerked towards the judge, who was still frozen in his half-standing, half-seated stance, considering if he should allow this hearing to take place. "Your Honor, you have to set him free. He's innocent. Please," she pleads. "Senora, where are the kids?" Jeremy asked worriedly. His ghastly wife faced him again. "They're fine, dear. Well, they're dead, but they're fine. They're at the park, playing." Jeremy thought of little Harley Sue, not even 2 when she passed, off at the park playing without an adult. Senora read his expression. "I figure not much else can happen to them now." She shrugged, forcing a laugh. Mr. Alcott, who was already up on his feet, cleared his throat and approached the judge's bench, nodding a hello to Mrs. Strout. "Your Honor, would you please allow Mrs. Strout to give her testimony? We've waited all this time, and if we prolong it any further, we cannot guarantee her appearance again." The judge was tired and hungry and ready to sit on his couch and kick his feet up, but he was also reasonable. He surrendered a sigh. All right, Mr. Alcott," court reinstated. He tapped his gavel, and the jurors all groaned as they found their seats again. "Make it quick, Mrs. Strout. We had all day, but that day is nearly gone." Mr. Alcott turned to Jeremy, giving him 2 thumbs up. Jeremy released all of the air he was holding on to. Mrs. Strout nodded and straightened in her seat, running her hands across her lap as if to flatten her dress. Out of habit, most ghosts seemed to retain this gesture. Mrs. Strout inhaled before she spoke. "The day I died, there was a harvest moon on the rise. The children were loud, and the house was a mess, and the fridge was nearly empty. I hadn't gotten to laundry in over a week. It was a pretty typical day in our house, actually," Mrs. Strout joked. Only a few in the room offered an empathetic laugh. The judge was less patient. "Mrs. Strout, while I have sympathy for your tragic death and the death of your 3 children, you are here to tell us if it was that man, Mr. Jeremy Strout, who did it. We do not need a bedtime story." Jeremy flinched at another man telling his wife what to do. "Let her speak." The judge shot him a daring gaze. Mr. Alcott squeezed his shoulder. Senora thanked him with her eyes, but behind them was a painful secret rising to the surface. "Of course, Your Honor. I know I've already taken up a lot of your time," she said, addressing the whole courtroom full of people. Then she looked down at her lap, twiddling her fingers. "The truth is, my children and I were killed by one of their parents." A gasp echoed across the walls of the room, and an uproar of whispers scattered like static. Mr. Alcott and Jeremy shared a confused stare. The judge banged his gavel, Order! Order! Everyone started to hush, but it wasn't until Senora shouted that silence fully resumed. But it wasn't Jeremy! Senora was crying now, looking directly at her husband. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. Jeremy's foot stopped bouncing. His mind was trying to solve an impossible puzzle. All these years, people had assumed he had murdered his entire family. But the truth was, he honestly didn't know what had happened to them. Just like he'd told the police, he'd come home from a long day at work and walked into the most horrific and life-shattering scene he'd ever witnessed. No one believed him. Senora's sobs were the only sound in the courtroom as everyone patiently waited for her to collect herself. Thankfully, Kleenex had developed a ghost-friendly facial tissue, and one of the guards brought it over to her. She wiped her eyes and spoke sternly, as if she had not just been wailing with abandon. Your Honor, you need to release my husband from prison right now. What are you saying, Senora? Jeremy whispered. The next words that Jeremy's wife spoke were undeniably the most important of his entire life. More life-altering than the ones spoken by the police who arrested him and the judge who convicted him. Senora's words freed Jeremy Strout from a prison death sentence and cleared his name of all criminal charges. But in the same instance, her words shackled him all over again, leaving him forever haunted by the truth. Diary of a serial killer. How might one endure the silent and secluded nature of winter? Be the bear, enter a deep cave, and dream, dream, dream. Jacqueline Suskin. I probably shouldn't be writing this, but oh fucking well. When the most precious thing lodged in your heart is ripped out and crushed by an unthinking alcoholic asshole driving with a revoked license, you do things, unimaginable things, and not just burying your beloved 8-year-old son, which was not on my shitty life bingo card. Oh, be these. But life wasn't shitty before. The word should be capitalized. Before. No, better yet, the before. Because now, life was rent in two, forever separated by the gaping maw of rage. The before and the after. A fissure of overwhelming grief that quickly cracked, allowing the steaming, boiling lava to emerge from her core. Oh, he would pay. That drunken dickhead. His money won't protect him. Not from me. They gave her the codename Mama Bear, but he never imagined that she was holed up in a cave. On a hunch, he came out to the Pennsylvania woods at night, alone. Common sense, and the FBI handbook, would label his actions reckless at best and suicidal at worst. But he didn't fear for his safety. Mama Bear targeted a certain type of prey. Except for being a male, he didn't fit her profile. Funny, they were both profilers. October snuck up behind him, picking up the crisp air, tossing it around. Playing offense, it switched tactics, threw it toward his face, temporarily snatching his breath. He continued to climb, quiet, crunching under his boots, allowing the patches of clearing and the light of the frosted full moon to guide his steps. He'd reach the cave no matter what, so the easy way was the best way. He put his hand in his front pocket, felt the crumpled page of a diary. The paper crinkled like the fallen leaves underfoot. It was mailed to him at his office. This one, and the other entries. He had the sense to turn in the others, but not this one. Well, most of the others. She vowed to herself that she would abstain from killing for a month, or so she wrote. By his accounts, it was day 30. He hoped her undated entry referred to October. At least he would have a day. One day. It was easier than I thought. I would say too easy, but that motherfucker mowed down my baby like a shirtless, beer-bellied jagoff hurrying to cut the grass before the Buccos game. Maybe it shouldn't be hard. Justice shouldn't be hard. Not in the semblance of a fair world. Leaves skittered and scurried around his legs, tumbling over each other like playing squirrels. He stopped, inhaled deeply. He loved the smell of fall, that last exhale of trees mixing with ripe decomposition. I'm so glad I live in a world of Octobers. He smiled at the memory of his sister quoting Anne Shirley, not so long ago. His smile fell. Not so long ago, yet forever ago. Tragedy has a way of altering time, elongating some parts and compressing others. He looked up through the lattice of bare limbs, a web of gnarled fingers, the indigo sky stitched with rhinestones. Did the stars foretell it? It was the mutable signs of the zodiac: Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, BTK, Dahmer, Bundy, the ones born at the end of a season, not in the middle, like the fixed signs, like Scorpio, like her. You'd think one was enough, but it wasn't. I realized AA was just one of many. Sure, I settled my score, but what of the other moms? Southmany, blights, diseases walking the earth, infecting others with their cruelty, their carelessness, their capriciousness. Someone had to bring order, just like Melville Dewey did to book classification. 000 to 999. He considered turning around to walk back down the hill. He turned, but didn't move. In the distance, the twinkling lights of downtown Pittsburgh weaved a terrestrial constellation of bridges, one-way traffic, and sundry skyscrapers. The Steel City, just like its people, metal backbones, gritty guts, and honest hearts. He craved a sandwich from Primanti's. Any sandwich. That was the last time he saw her. At Primanti's. The original one. He wasn't one to second-guess himself. His mom drummed it into their heads from the cradle. Trust self first, last, and only. First, last, only. Thanks to the internet and social media, it's not hard to find someone, or their misdeeds. What was once relegated to a diary like this is now vomited onto Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube for all to see. Many lap it up, probably because it makes them feel less uncomfortable about their own stupid decisions and meaningless lives. Here for the mindless braggart, many blowhards make for less research when it comes to this side gig. He cracked his neck, onward and upward, one foot in front of the other, crunching leaves, whipping wind, snapping twigs. Up, he climbed. He was getting close. His hand reached towards his front pocket. Again. He read the page dozens of times, just like the rest. He couldn't help it. Just touching the decal-edged diary page brought clarity and understanding. He had to find her first. Could it be that easy? I think this might be my last entry. I knew it was a bad idea. No, make that bad idea, to write things down. But writers write. Fish swim. Birds fly. Dogs bark. Writers write. And mama bears? Well, unless you're bent from birth, looking at you, mutable signs, no one sets out to be a killer. Or, as I like to differentiate, a remover. Scrooge, or Dickens, had it partly right. Decrease the surplus population. He just needed to add of assholes. Decrease the surplus population of assholes. Dangerous, foul, hollow assholes. He neared the ridge. He was getting close. He pulled out the wrinkled diary page. He couldn't help it. The moon illuminated the page, but he couldn't make out the words. Strange glyphs, occultic squiggles, just like those found on the astrological charts she used to interpret. Meaningless symbols to the untrained eye, but metaphysical gold to the mystic. He didn't need to be able to read the entry. He had it memorized. The cave. He could see the entrance. Dark, yawning. An inky maw, just like her rage. He reached into the other pocket for his flashlight. She beat him to it. Her flashlight shone on the ground ahead so as not to blind him. Hey sis. Hey bro. What took you so long? The thumping. The museum's intercom crackled on with train station static. Hello, Norval Museum. I ducked at the sound, trying to escape it, cracking my eardrums. He spoke fast, like a sports announcer, at the most critical part of the game. Welcome to your nightly broadcast from your favorite night guard. As always, we must get the boring things out of the way before we have some fun. His voice trailed up and down with the meter of a radio host. It was well practiced. If there is any other human in this fine establishment other than your Steve and Linda, remember, you are stuffed. If there is anyone else here, you will be arrested, and you could be charged with robbery as you are on the premises 30 minutes after closing. He sounded way too excited for his long night shift. So, if there are any other living souls in this building, we get to start my favorite game. Hide and go, speak. I'll count to 30, and then the game starts. Have fun. I could hear the big generators for each light system shutting off, their cranks getting closer each time until the painting in front of me darkened. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light of the exit sign, his words started to set in my head. You will be arrested. I couldn't be arrested. Not again. And especially not with robbery charges. Over the still air, a whistle was carried from deep within the museum. It tickled my ears with its swinging tune. With the lightest footsteps I could make, I reached the exit sign. Touching the cold metal made my hair stand on end as I gently pressed on the long bar until a loud click crashed through the room like a cymbal. The whistling stopped, and the silence became much louder. I looked around frantically, removing some of my precious light as my hair whipped around my face. If I was caught, I would have to look into my mother's eyes as she said, I wouldn't be surprised if she did this, Judge. I couldn't hear that again. My eyes caught a big pot in the middle of the room. It was decorated with strips and little dancing people moving across the two-dimensional plane. As carefully as possible, I opened the lid and slipped my first leg into it. My footsteps sounded like a gong as I put my second in and slipped my body past the hole into the pot. Once the lid was over my head, I was in total darkness. Not even putting my hand in front of my face would give my eyes information. My breathing sounded like it was through a megaphone as it rose up and down, breathing in the clay, which was probably hundreds of years old. I tried to close my eyes, even though it changed nothing, and think about something other than where I was. The more I thought, the more my breathing sounded like it was coming from a tornado. My wind created gale force winds faster as I felt water drip onto my folded knees. My mind raced almost as fast. A thumping started to grow louder. At first, I thought it was from outside that he had found me. It kept getting faster, like he was running in place right outside my pot, teasing me with the promise of captivity, playing with me, just like his stupid voice played up and down like a carousel. I put a hand over my mouth to quiet my breath. Thump, 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 thump. over and over, like an incessant heartbeat, his feet went up and down and up and down. For minutes, his feet went on, just right outside my pot. The drips on my knees were getting bigger and more frequent, adding another sound to my existence. At any moment, he could just open the lid and get this all over with, but he was choosing to mess with me. Thump drip, over and over, faster and faster. I couldn't control my breath, and what did it matter if he was going to torment me? He knew I was there. All he had to do was open the lid and let the red light in. Let it flood in and wash over my face like a river, rinse away the guilt for just a brief moment. Instead, he chose to mess with me. He chose to step and step just outside my reach. I could barely control myself. I started to rock back and forth, and with me, the pot. Thump, drip, clang. Thump, drip, clang. I couldn't do it again. I didn't want to do it again. But when if he opened that lid, I would have to. He deserved it for stepping over and over. His never ending. Thump, thump, thump. My legs started to tingle with anticipation. I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my veins. My breath got faster as I stared at where I guessed the lid was. My pot rocked back and forth with me, getting ready for his fly-like hands to lift the lid. That's all he was, just a disgusting fly. But all he did was thump, thump, thump. I felt even more adrenaline burst through me as the rocking got faster, my breath got faster, and his shoes got faster. I have to. He'll get me if I don't. I have to. Rung through my head as the thump, thump, drip, thump, thump, clang rang on. A new sound sounded as a voice called out from the other side of the pot's walls. "Hey!" Another shot of adrenaline cracked open like lightning, and I could feel my legs practically vibrating from the sound. The thumping from his shoes meeting the hardwood floor, my breath at record-breaking speeds, the rocking only being contained by my leans, and drip dripping that reminded my legs to be ready. I want to do it again. I leaped out of the pot before his hand touched it. My head was buzzing with sounds, screams, thumps, tears, and then more screaming. Sounds of teeth on flesh and nails on muscle rang out throughout the silent museum like the most beautiful symphony. Thumps of bodies slamming on the ground, drips of ruby blood, and winds cut from hands swatting me away. I had done it again, and yet it did not go. Thump, thump, thump.